Good afternoon, everyone, or perhaps it's good morning, depending upon where you are. I'm located just outside of Toronto, so for me it is afternoon. Hopefully everything is doing well at your end and you have some nice weather. It's a little cloudy, a little gray at our end, but at least we have no snow today. So we're going to jump in and get started. And our topic for today is how to implement workflow and organization management. So this is me. My name is Juliet Aurora. I am the president and CEO of AIS Solutions and the co-founder of the Ninja Network. AIS Solutions is a bookkeeping and QuickBooks training firm located in Canada and Ontario. And Ninja Network is an educational and resource community for bookkeepers in the accounting profession. So you're going to spend the next hour with me. We're going to talk about workflows and how important they are, but more importantly, how to get started and what that can possibly mean to your practice. So let's start with the agenda for today. So as I said, we're together for an hour. We're going to start out with the foundation of setting up a workflow, walk through the actual process, and spend some time on the details of setting up this workflow for you. And then, of course, what the end result is going to look like. And we'll go through an example as well of a workflow that's a little bit on the completed side, so you can have an idea of what it should look like when you're done. We are going to leave 15 minutes at the end for questions, but also if you do have questions throughout the process, please feel free to ask them as you go along. There should be a box down the right-hand side with a little tab that says questions that you can open up, and you can type in the questions. Maybe let's just do a little housekeeping, make sure it works. If someone can type in a question, let's see if it works and I can see it. Maybe type in, hi, Kimmy. Okay, so perfect. It's working at our end. Maybe even list where you're from, your name, get to know you a little bit better, since the one thing with webinars, it all tends to be kind of a one-way conversation. And it would be nice that I know that someone's actually out there listening. So, hey, Kathy, and Kimmy is sharing something, the gray, and it cuts off the question for me. So I'll have to make sure that I can see the whole question when we get to it. Okay, so our question box is working, which is perfect. And I think we had a little flash on my screen there. So hopefully it is that everyone can still see the slides. Okay, so we're going to start out with a great quote by Deepak Chopra, which I think is kind of to set the mindset for us for the next hour. You're probably in the chaos stage now, which is why you're on this webinar. And keep in mind that, as Deepak Chopra says, all great changes are preceded by chaos. So if you're in the chaos stage now, great things are coming your way. So hopefully this presentation is going to get you out of the chaos and get you closer to the great things. Okay, so let's start with a definition of what is a workflow. This is a definition straight out of a dictionary. It's the sequence of industrial, administrative, or other process through which a piece of work passes from initiation to completion. Sounds really, really technical. But if we put it in the context of our industry, in the bookkeeping and accounting industry, it basically is a system to organize the setup, the performance, and the delivery for the services that you provide. So in more than anything else, what we want to be able to do is we want to take all the things that reside in your brain and put them down on paper or put them into a software program. And it allows you to not only delegate the tasks, but have the tasks completed the way that you want them to be done. And one of the main features or advantages of having a workflow is that you don't forget things, that things are documented and you can actually take them out of your brain. So why do you need one? So without a workflow, you can have the following things happen. You're going to have stress. Deadlines can get missed. You can't sleep. You're lying awake at 3 a.m. in a cold sweat trying to remember, did I file my client's GST or HST return? Things fall through the cracks. We're all human. We all make mistakes. We all forget things. We all have busy lives and, personal lives and work lives and other clients. You have more than one client. So things fall through the cracks. If you don't have a workflow, it is really, really difficult to scale your business. What you find is that if it all resides in your head, then you also are going to be the person that becomes the bottleneck, because everything's going to have to go through you because your team isn't going to know what has to be done. You're going to have unhappy clients. If you miss deadlines or things fall through the cracks, you're going to end up with unhappy clients. Stress. If you don't have a workflow, you're going to have stress, and you're going to have more stress. And did I mention that you're going to have stress? If you are the king or queen of sticky notes, if your system is driven by color-coded sticky notes, if you spend the first hour of your day figuring out what it is that you need to do, or if the thought of going on vacation sends chills down your spine or your client's spines, then a workflow is very important for you. If you have staff or a team that works for you, it's even more important. If one of your staff gets sick, no one is going to know where they left off if there is no system in place to verify where they left off and what is outstanding. Or if you have a team, then you're constantly going to be interrupted where they have to ask you what needs to be done, as opposed to them being able to go somewhere to see what needs to be done. So do I have everyone excited and understanding why you need a workflow? Hopefully, yes. So now that you know you need one, where do you start? Probably the hardest part for most people, but also I think the most important part is to start out with some time blocking. And your first thought as I say this to you is, oh my God, I don't have any time. I can't spare any time, but you can, and you have to. Even if it is 15 minutes a day or a half hour every other day, whatever it is, start out, especially when you're in the initial phases of working out a workflow, block out some time so that you can work on this workflow. The first step after you have blocked out your time is you have to pick a tool. And we want you to pick one. And quite honestly, it doesn't matter which one you pick. Don't spend all your time researching and trying and changing and flipping from one tool to the next tool. And I know a lot of people that start this journey of implementing a workflow. And what they do is they test out every single workflow practice management tool that's out there. And there are a lot of them out there. And they try it and they play with it and they spend a couple of weeks doing that. Then they're not sure that they really like it, so they move on to the next one. And then they move on to the next one. And then they move on to the next one. And now 3 months or 2 months have passed and they still are no further than where they were before, but they feel like they're working on their workflow. So there are a lot of people that get stuck in this phase thinking, well, what if I choose the wrong one? Well, honestly, will any workflow or any tool be better than what you have right now? If the answer to that is yes, pick one. It's not a lifetime commitment. You can certainly, yes, it's work, but you can certainly move it to a new tool if it isn't working for you. And if you've built something out in one tool, whichever tool it is, it's going to be a lot easier for you to move it to something else because you already have a starting point. So there's lots of options. There's a couple that we put up on the screen here, but as I said, there are tons of options that are out there. The first one on the screen on the left-hand side is the one that's built into your QuickBooks Online accountant dashboard, and it's called Work. It can try and it integrates within QuickBooks Online. I'm not going to go through a demo of any of them. I'm basically putting some out there for you to think about and of course to choose. So the QuickBooks Online Practice Management is one. Teamwork Project Management is the one that we use in our firm, in our office. We've been using it probably 4 or 5 years now, if not longer. And when we started using it, I'm often asked the question, well, why are you using Teamwork rather than Arrow or Carbon or Asana? And quite honestly, we started using Teamwork because there was nothing else out there when we were looking for it. Right now, there are lots that are designed specific to our industry. Arrow is an example of that. Carbon is an example of that. And what it allows you to do is it gives you a starting point. If you are starting from scratch, both Arrow and Carbon will allow you, they'll give you a path to follow in order to set everything up. Ones like Asana and Teamwork, basically you can build anything you want, but you're starting from scratch. So if you're just starting out, maybe start with one that is designed for the industry. So it is a little bit, you have a head start, you have a platform to start with. The one thing also is that you want to choose one that thinks like you do. If you find it easy to navigate, so do the trial run. They all have, 7-day, 14-day trials. If you find it easy to navigate, it's intuitive to the way your brain works, then you're also going to have a greater likelihood that you're going to use it. If it's a painful process for you, you'll never get it off the ground. And even though I've listed some of these tools on here, which are practice management tools, you can use Excel or you can use Smartsheet. It's a little bit more manual as you start to build it out, but you can certainly use any of those tools as well. You can do pen and paper. It doesn't need to be an automated tool, but again, we're all so strapped for time that if you have some things that can be automated for you, then it is going to save you some time. So some basic things that we look for when we were looking for our practice management tool was whether or not you can set up recurring tasks. Both accounting and bookkeeping really is designed, the services that we provide tend to be repetitive services. So if you're using something like Excel, then every time you need to offer that service, you have to create a new line in your workflow for it. The power of the automated tools like Teamwork and Carbon and the QuickBooks management, practice management, or Asana is that it has the ability to create recurring tasks. So you set it up once and then you set the frequency for it and it'll auto-generate itself. So it can save you a lot of time. So that's certainly a feature that we are looking for all the time when we're recommending a practice management system. Client specific. You want to be able to set up separate task lists for every client so that, again, you can customize it to the services that you provide to that client. You don't want one task list that is going to be used for every single client that you use. You're going to have a lot of items that are similar, but you want to be able to customize it. You want a place that you can put in some notes, that you can document a little bit further some specific things that may relate only to this client. And if you have a team, or if you have the plans for growing a team, then you need something that's going to allow you to assign the tasks to somebody else. If it's just yourself, then you're fine. You don't need this feature, but if you are in the thought process that you're going to hire somebody, or you already have a team in place, then you do want to have the ability to create the tasks and assign them to somebody else so that they don't show up in your to-do list. Okay, so now that we have a tool, right, because everybody has chosen one and isn't spending all their time researching it, the next step is that you are going to start documenting things. And more than anything else, as you start documenting things, a lot of the reasons that we are good at what we do is we like details and we like checklists. And sometimes we get so bogged down in the details that we never get off the ground. So what you want to do is cut yourself some slack. The most important thing you want to do is start, and you want to start at a high level. what you want to start documenting, a basic workflow, if you think about it, is a series of checklists. Enter my bills, and I'll talk about it from the bookkeeping perspective. Enter my bills, process my payments, process payroll, file sales tax, enter in my sales. That's at a very high level what your checklist needs to look like. For this particular client, we don't do sales, so I don't need a checkbox that says enter the sales. We're only doing the payment processing side. So I only have a task list that says enter my bills. So you want to create a checklist of what it is that you do for the client. You want to pick a client when you're starting, actually create it for a client that you already have. Some people try and do it, kind of esoteric, and it doesn't really relate to any client in particular. And it's so much harder if you're doing it theoretically than if you're doing it practically. So start with a client that you're already looking after, that you're familiar with. So don't start it with a new client where you don't necessarily know how the services are going to be provided. Start this process with a client that you've already been working with for a little while. We always recommend that you try and start it with a client that is duplicatable. And what I mean by that is that it's either the industry, or it's the list of services that you provide, or the way that you do things for this client is also the same way that you do things for a couple of other clients. And if that's the case, then what you're going to do is you're going to be able to set up this process for this client and duplicate it with another client very easily. You don't want to start this process with a client that has all of the exceptions, that yes, you normally do it this way, but for this client, you do it this way. Those aren't the ones you want to start with, because what you want to be able to do is leverage what it is you're creating. And that's my new favorite word. I was just at a conference for the last 2 days, which was a business excellence conference. And the word for I think the 2.5 days that I was there was leverage. What you need to be able to do is leverage your time. As I said, we're all so strapped for time that you want to be able to create something once and then use it in more than one place. So you want to start with a client that it is duplicatable. And don't expect it to be perfect. I said at the beginning, what makes us good at what we do is paying attention to the details. But don't expect it to be perfect on your first round, because it's not going to be. What the key is that you start. Now you can do this in a couple of different ways. You can either make a list, and as I said, a basic workflow, it's a series of lists or a series of checklists. So you could either do a really high level list, which is, enter bills, process payroll, do a bank rec, file sales tax, or you could create a couple of tasks underneath each of those big headers. So for example, enter bills could be broken out into the following steps: push bills across from HubDoc, enter manual paper bills, review AP report. And again, this is still a really high level of what all those steps are for enter bills. But that's what you want, is you want to start at a high level. And don't try and put in every single step. Think of it first, take a step back, and what are the big things that I do for this client? What are the big things under each of these steps that I do for this client? In this example, are there any important steps that need to be completed for this client's AP process? So for example, are they doing job costing? One of your tasks then would be all expenses need to have a customer or job attached to them. So that's your basic workflow that you're starting with, and you're going to create, a list for every single big task that you do for the client: AP, AR, payroll, sales tax, month-end reconciliations. After you have that initial list, then you're going to start and go into a little bit more detail. So in this example above, let's talk about, for example, how frequently are you processing their bills? Are you doing it daily, or are you doing it weekly or monthly or quarterly? Because what you're going to do is, once you have this list, you're going to start to build timelines into it. not only for when they're due, but for when you need to start working on them. So for example, if the bill processing is done every week and the deadline is Friday, and you know it only takes you one day, then your timeline for it is Thursday and Friday. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. And what you also want to do is you want to create instructions as to what happens when something doesn't meet the criteria that's listed. So if you're pushing bills across from HubDoc and something can't be pushed across from HubDoc, then it moves to the next step, which is enter manually. So in the job costing example, what do you need to do with a bill that doesn't have a customer or job? You want to have a step in there for what it is, how you would handle the exceptions if it doesn't flow smoothly through all of these steps. Okay, so you can make a list if you are a list person. You can put it on a spreadsheet. So here's an example of, again, it's the AP that we're talking about. So I've taken those same items that were on that checklist before, and I've added a couple of columns. So I have a frequency, I've got deadlines, and I have a column for if it's who it's assigned to in my organization. So as I said, you can certainly do it in a spreadsheet. What you're then going to have to do, though, is duplicate it every time you want to use it. So if it's a daily task of push across receipt bank, you're going to have to set this up for every day that you can tick it off. Because the important thing is you want to have a place that you can indicate somewhere on there that it's done. Again, that's going to help you keep track of what it is, you've walked away from this client, you've come back, where is it that I need to start? That's what's going to help you, is being able to check it off in some way or another. So you can do it in a list, you can do it in a spreadsheet, you can do it in a flowchart. Any of them are going to work. All of them are going to work. What you want to do is choose the method to outline this based on how your brain thinks and works. Okay, so now that you have your checklist, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what the next steps are. So you want to make sure that it's, or you want to not set the expectation that it's going to be perfect, because it's not going to be perfect. You want to create this first outline of what the list on a high level looks like for your clients. And then you're going to sit down with that list while you're working on the client. So your first step is create the list when you're not working on the client, and then sit down while you're working on the client. And that's where you're going to fill in all of the details. You're going to put in timelines, as we talked about. And the timelines are going to serve a couple of different purposes. It's going to tell you and remind you when things are due. If you have clients where you're doing accounts payable every Friday, and you bring on a new client and their AP schedule is also on Friday, you're going to be able to tell whether or not you can handle another client to do AP on Friday, or do you need to give it to somebody else, or do you need to ask them whether or not they can move their AP to Thursdays because you have too much to do on Fridays. So your timelines are not only going to remind you as to what needs to be done, but it's going to also remind you or help you plan for when you bring on new clients as to what you can handle and what days you can handle and how much work you can handle and how much work you can handle on that one day. So the second step is going to take you the longest time in this process. Hopefully, from my earlier slides, it's not the time that you're choosing a tool that is your longest process, because this should be the longest amount of time you spend on your process. So as you're working on the client, you're going to sit down and you're processing their AP, start adding some details into those high level tasks that you created. So for example, if you had push across your bills from HubDoc, put a couple of steps underneath them as to, for example, if you're job costing, that's where you're putting in the details that a customer job has to be attached. What happens if there is no customer job that's attached? What are the typical payment methods, that are used? What happens if, it's an expense that you don't know what it's for, even though you have a copy of the bill? What's the process that you do with that? And after you have completed what you think is a pretty solid checklist for this client, give it to somebody else and ask them to complete it. If you have a team member, that's perfect. Create your process and then have one of them complete it. You will be surprised and stunned as to how much stuff you take for granted that's in your head and that you don't document it. Add in the things that you've missed before you're going to move on to the next step. It's going to probably end up going back and forth a couple of times where you document it. You are going to, oh, and we've lost my screen here. Hold on a second. Where you're documenting it, and then you're going to give it to somebody to try, and you're going to have to take it back and revise it. Nothing is going to work on the first go round, so don't expect it to work on the first go round. Hopefully that makes sense. And again, what you want more than anything is you want to make sure, and I think we've lost our, okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. It looks like it's shifted a couple times and we went back to the beginning and now we're back. You should all be seeing try, fail, learn, repeat. Hopefully that's what everybody can see. Okay, so what you want to make sure that you're doing is not expecting that it's going to be right on the first go round, because it's not. You absolutely have to create it, put it out there, let someone else try and do it and learn from it. You may only go back once, you may go back 10 times before there's enough steps in this one process for this one client that it's going to run solid. What you're also going to find as you're building this out is the first time you do it, you're not going to think of everything. Whereas when it goes to someone else, they're going to actually, and you want them to follow the absolute letter of what your process is. Tell them not to improvise, because if they're improvising, then it means that there's a step that's missing in your process. Once you have this process in place where it's gone back and forth a couple of times and it's pretty solid, it's not going to be perfect, it's always going to be evolving, but it's pretty solid, you're now going to duplicate it for another client. So once your first client is complete, you're going to roll it out for your second client. Okay, so your end result, and we have an example after we talk about what you're going to have. We have an example of what a completed process is going to look like. So there's a couple of things that you're going to get. The first thing you're going to find is that your productivity has increased. And a lot of people don't associate creating a workflow with increasing your productivity, but it absolutely will, and it'll do it for a couple of reasons. You're going to increase your productivity because you're not going to spend that first hour of every day trying to figure out where you need to be and what you need to start on. You're going to be able to sit down and you're going to open up your practice management system for the day, and it's going to tell you that, hey, I need to work on Bob's garage today, and I left off entering halfway through his accounts payable, so I need to pick up, and that's where I need to pick up. So you're going to speed up the ability to sit down and actually start working faster. You're also going to find that as you're creating these processes across your clients, you'll be able to learn what you're not doing efficiently, that you're doing it differently for this client and differently for this client. But if you were able to move client B into the process the same way that you're doing it for client A, it's actually going to be faster for you. So it does give you the ability to take a step back and look at, and we often get just so busy in doing the work that we're not able to take a step back to see how we can improve things. As you work on your workflow, you will find that you're going to be able to take that little bit more objective view, which should help. You're going to increase your consistency of delivery. And that's really important, especially again, from an accounting bookkeeping perspective. The consistency is important. The delivery to our clients is important. We want to be able to provide them with a service that they can rely on. And things fall through the cracks if it all relies on your brain, because we're human and there's no way that we're going to be able to remember everything that we have to do for every single client every day and keep our sanity. So having checklists or having some kind of tool that is going to track those for you is going to increase your consistency of your delivery. Allowing your firm to scale, and that may be something you want to do or you don't want to do, and absolutely 100% personal preference. If you want to scale though, if that is on your radar, the only way you're going to be able to do that is to be able to document and create some systems and processes. One of the biggest complaints of people in our industry when they hire employees or they hire subcontractors is that they don't do the work as well as I do it or as you would do it. And the reason for that is everybody does things differently. If you want them to do things the way that you want them to be done, you need to be able to tell them what that is. And as good as we are at the accounting, bookkeeping, the number side, sometimes we're not so good at training, and we're not good at conveying, what the steps are or what the outcome is that we want for this particular client. So in order to scale and in order to maintain, the level of service being exactly the same, regardless of who it is in your firm that's doing it, you need to have a workflow. It's going to increase the value of your business. If you want to sell your business down the road or sell your practice down the road, if you have documented systems and workflows in place, it fundamentally increases the value of what you can sell the business for. If everything resides in your head, then the value of the business isn't there. The value is you, and you're not going to be able to walk away from it. Disaster proofing your business and your clients. Obviously, being in the cloud helps do that. It helps ensure that no matter, your computer crashes, the data still stays intact. What if you get hit by a bus? Who's going to know all those things that were in your brain when you got hit by the bus? Or let's maybe put a more positive spin on it. Not that you got hit by a bus, you won the lottery and you want to move to the Mayan Riviera and sit on a beach instead of sitting in an office doing bookkeeping and accounting. If that's the case and you want to walk away for a much more positive reason than getting hit by a bus, then you want to be able to have some systems and processes that are documented and your workflow documented for the clients so that someone can come in and step in very easily while you are working on your tan and drinking your mudslide or margarita. But more importantly, you're going to get some sleep. And people think I'm joking when I say that, you're actually going to get some sleep, but it probably was the biggest eye opener or perhaps eye closer for me when we started to build out our systems and processes, was being able to get some sleep, because I wasn't lying in bed thinking, did I do this? Is someone looking after this? Do we have, is the payroll for our client tomorrow, for this client tomorrow, or is that next week? Did we get the hours in for this client? And quite honestly, it can drive you completely mental if you try, and especially as you grow and you've got multiple clients. So you want to make sure that what you've got is a system in place to get it out of your head so that it's not all in your head. Once you have the systems or the workflow in place for your clients, you can do this for pretty much anything in your organization. So I've got a template on my screen. As I said, we use Teamwork. So this is a report that's generated out of Teamwork. And it's a report of all the tasks for when we hire a new team member. So you don't only have to do this for client-facing stuff, you can also do it internally for your business. So these are the steps that we've got of what we have to do, what someone has to do. As you can see, my name is the created by, but I'm not the responsible person. I'm not the one that actually has to do it. I just set up the tasks to start out with. Now whenever we hire a new person, it used to be me that had to do all of these tasks. I don't have to anymore. I'm just able, we create this, we duplicate this project because it is set up as a template, and someone else can run with it and make sure that all of these steps get done. So some of the steps are, we have cloud, AIS cloud. So we need to send a user request to our IT person to get them set up. We set up an email address for them through G Suite. We set up user access and teamwork. We add them to our teamwork chat. We have a template for monthly recurring bookkeeping. And so we set them up as a team member into that template. So whenever we create or use that monthly bookkeeping template, their name is already in it, and we don't need to set them up every time. We need to give them, set up a network access for them. We add them to our receipt bank. We add them to our QBO. We add them to our HubDoc. If we have any QuickBooks, this is an older template. We don't do QuickBooks Desktop anymore, but we used to add them up into QuickBooks Desktop. We add their email to our printer. We have the ability with our printer to scan a document and have it go by email, which means that they actually need an email address programmed and saved in our printer. And so it's an actual task on our task list. Our task list for when we hire someone new is about 6 pages. I'm only showing you page 1, and then the next one is page 2, but there are actually 6 pages of tasks that take place so that nothing gets missed and that anybody can do it. You actually, as you progress through this process, what you're going to do is you're going to add more and more detail behind every one of these steps. So your first step is to create the list. Your second step is to document how do they do what's on that list. So for example, set up an email address via G Suite, which is our second task on this list. We actually have a document behind it that if the person that is responsible for that doesn't know how to do it, here's the step-by-step of how to do it. So again, we can put anybody into that role who's able to do it. Obviously on the accounting and bookkeeping side, they need the knowledge behind it, but there are some things that they don't. So if it is, set up a file folder, if you're still in a paper-based practice and you bring on a new client and you need to set up a file folder system for them, step by step, what do the tabs need to look like? Is there a particular font that you want to use? Is there a particular file folder color? Is there a particular place that they all get filed? And again, you're probably thinking, oh my God, there's no way that that's just ridiculous. There's no way that I'm ever going to do that or that I should do it. But as you go through the steps of being able to get things out of your brain, or you want to be able to have someone else duplicate what it is you do, that is the only way, without you having to train someone new every single time. You want to be able to leverage the knowledge that's in your head once and create some documents and some processes so that somebody else can train them. And it isn't you, but things will get done the way that you want. One of the biggest complaints, with people hiring new staff members or subcontractors is that they don't do it the way that I want them to do it. But how do they know the way you want them to do it unless you give them some kind of a document? So this is page 1. And then we also have one of the tasks lists that we have for this new employee is training. What do we need to train them on? We have to give them a tour of how Teamwork, as I said, Teamwork is the practice management system that we use. So we give them a tour of our Teamwork. And that could be one line. And when we started our checklist process, it was 1 line. Over the years, what we've realized is that everybody gave a tour differently. So we listed the things as to make sure that when you're giving them the tour, these are the things you have to cover off. And again, this is what you want to be able to do for your clients, regardless of what service it is that you provide. You can create a checklist for it. So we give them a tour of our teamwork, and we give them a general tour. We give them a detailed overview of projects. We tell them how to add people, how to add companies, how to add tasks, how to modify tasks, how to create subtasks and dependent tasks, how to make them recurring, how to email into the project. We have a manual which is called the Ultimate AIS Manual, and so they have to we teach them how to access and how to add content to it. We have a group calendar. What type of information is stored on that calendar? How do they add it? How do they add information into that calendar? We use T-sheets in our organization. How do they clock in and how do they clock out? How do they choose what client or job they're working on and what the service item is that they're working on? So again, as I said, it sounds like it's really, really detailed, but if you look at when we started this, our training was tour of teamwork calendar, tour of T-sheets, and it was 3 lines. And it was still further ahead that when the person started, we remembered to walk them through the programs that we wanted to walk them through, and that it wasn't only relying on in our brain what order they needed to get shown things. So more than anything else, it's designed to create some kind of structure in your organization and create some structure for your practice overall. Usually it's easiest to start with your stuff for your clients, and you're going to leverage the most time in your practice as you are able to take the stuff and be able to increase your efficiency and your productivity for your client work before you can move on to the ones like this, which are much more internal. Okay, so I've been doing a lot of talking. I would like to open it up. We've got about 16 minutes left. I'd like to open it up to questions, and I'm here to answer any and all questions that I can. Okay, so Kimmy is asking the question, if it says page 1 of 9. So the bottom of the page is at page 1 of 9, and if you were wondering if that was a typo, so Kimmy is talking about on my my training. No, it was my Ninja onboarding task list. It actually isn't. It's not a typo. It says page 1 of 9. It printed it off as a PDF, but in my program, it's also page 1 of 9 because of the way that it's laid out. But literally, we've got 6 or 7 pages of tasks that are there when we hire a new person, what the steps are. Okay, so Natalie asks the question, what's the estimated time that should be allocated for setting up workflows for each client? Quite honestly, it's really hard to answer that because every client is so different. And the services that everybody provides is so different. What you want to do is you want to start with some time blocking in your calendar. That should be your first step, so that you actually take some time out of your calendar, especially the steps that are before you start working on the client and documenting. So what you want to start with is 15 or 20 minutes, a day, half an hour every other day, an hour once a week, whatever you can, whichever way you work better. If it's easier for you to pull 15 minutes at a time, then do that. When you start working on and documenting the individual steps for the client, what you're also going to find is going to take you a little bit longer to do that work for the client. So when you're asking about how much time should be allocated for setting up the workflow, when you get into the steps of actually documenting the client and what you do, what you want to be able to do is just expand the amount of time it's going to take you to do the work for that client, so that you build in some time to be documenting it. And like I said, when you are starting, you're going to do really high level. enter bills, or process AP, process AR, process payroll. I took you all the way through to the, the detail and the minutia of what it would look like. And again, this is, we're 4 or 5 years into our checklist, which is why our checklist is 9 pages. But when you're starting, you want to start with there being really, really high level. The more detail you put into that, the more time that's going to take. Hopefully that answers your question, Natalie. I know you were probably saying, spend an hour and you'll have a workflow for a client. But unfortunately, I can't say that with any certainty or give you that kind of. Okay, so we've got another question from Abe. Do I have suggested resources, material links where we can get checklist templates? I don't. As I mentioned, if you're starting with one of the practice management systems that are designed for our industry, they give you starting points. So they do have some standards that you can start with. I think Arrow gives you Arrow is designed by Laura Redmond, who runs a bookkeeping firm. And so I think in her software, she kind of gives you her outline and the order to follow. Carbon, I believe, does the same thing. Other than that, I'm not really sure. I mean, there's lots of people that are out there who are out there sharing the workflows that they use. I'm not sure it's in a documented format as opposed to, we start here and then we do this and this and this, but I don't know of any place where you can get where someone sells their checklist templates. And then Kimmy asked me if we sell our templates. We don't really. I mean, through Ninja, we have some of our templates in relation to, we have a hiring process. So we have our hiring process template. We have our employee onboarding template is on there. We have a really basic monthly recurring bookkeeping template on there. But I mean, we must have, at least hundreds of templates in our office. We actually have a template in our office, which is how to answer the phone. So that when we hire somebody new, they've already got the script of how they answer the phone, or when, we have someone sitting in for our admin person who isn't at the front desk that day and they're subbing, that there's a template of the steps of here's how you answer the phone, here's how you transfer a phone call, because you're not going to remember if you don't do it all the time. I rarely transfer phone calls in my office, and I actually have to open up that template when I need to transfer a phone call. So, so I'm not sure that answers your question or not, Kimmy. There are some in Ninja, and Ninja is with a K, KNINJA.net, but there aren't, we don't have our full set of templates, but I'll certainly mention that to Steve, and maybe that's something that he wants to upload and get up there. And then Karen says that there may be some templates on Carbon. Perfect. I thought that Carbon had some, and I'm pretty sure that Arrow has some as well. I'm just not sure about any of the other ones. Okay, perfect. Any other questions? We still have a couple of minutes to go through. Is everyone just completely overwhelmed as to where it is that they need to start? Hopefully not. Hopefully that's not what you're feeling, but you're actually excited about what creating a workflow can do for you and can do for your practice. And as I said, the starting point is high level. Don't try and come up with a 9-page template the first time. You want to, if you can cover everything that you're doing for the client in like on half a page or 3/4 of a page, that is a really good starting point because you're starting. And the hardest part is everyone is thinking about what that end result needs to look like and what it needs to accomplish. You still want to get it as close as possible in order to, you want to get it as close as possible to getting moving and going in that direction. And Jocelyn says, great presentation, Juliet. Thank you so much, Jocelyn. I appreciate that. Okay, so if there's no other questions, then I'm going to sign off here. Thank you so much for attending. I know you guys are all really, really busy, and to take an hour out of your day. So if you're able to take an hour out of your day to attend the webinar, think about taking that time and actually working on your workflow. Okay, so we're just going to head back, and I'll tell you about the next presentation that's coming up. Okay, so there's my thank you. So the next webinar is growing your practice, pitching your bookkeeping services to your clients and your prospective clients. It's on March 7th, and it is, I believe it's being done by Marnie Stretch, who is awesome, a fellow Albertan. I was born and raised in Alberta, and the registration link is on there as well. And so that is the next webinar in March, and I believe there's one, every month. So QuickBooks and Intuit will keep you updated on what the next ones are and what order they're coming in. Hope you enjoyed it, and have an awesome week, everyone, and a great weekend. And hopefully we'll see you all soon.